Are you a fan of retro-styled indie games? Well, if you are, I've got good news for you because Argol, Kronoss Castle, might just be for you. It sticks really closely to retro classics like Castlevania and Rygar, a bit of an arcadey kind of feel to it, but the choice to keep Argol kind of in the past has its positives and its negatives. And while I did enjoy most of the game, there are parts of it that might turn off some players. Because I know for me personally, the later half of the game was a bit unfair, frustrating, and confusing. So if you're not a fan of those elements of games, then you're probably not going to like this one. Before we dive fully into the gameplay, I just briefly want to mention the story. It's something that we've seen many times before. Basically what it equates to is man needs to save girlfriend. And the way that it's handled is a little bit different. She wasn't kidnapped or anything like that, but you play as Argol, and he's on a journey to save his girlfriend because she's seriously ill. So he's seeking the magician, Kronoss, to hopefully heal his ill girlfriend. You'll travel through a bunch of hostile lands across 6 different acts. There's a few different levels for each act, and it doesn't quite play like a Metroidvania, but it isn't linear. So each area, each act is kind of wide open. And your goal is usually to eliminate the enemies, collect the keys, reach the end, defeat the boss, and then you'll move on to the next. Now there are some optional elements to the game. So there's things like health upgrades you can acquire. There's also caged people that you could save. I don't really know the story behind the caged people, but they're prisoners and you can save them and you'll get some points. But I'll also track this in the menus, and I don't know if it has any sort of ending implications. And then there's also harps you can collect, which will unlock part of the soundtrack in what's basically like a music player. Again, that's in the menus. There are achievements to unlock in the game, which on the Switch version that I'm playing here are obviously exclusive to the game. There's no system-wide achievement system. So if you like achievements, they're here. And now Argol is basically an action platformer, and you can attack with your sword, and then there's also upgrades you can get, and you lose them when you die. So it's kind of like Castlevania in that regard, like how you'd get a longer whip. You get a longer attack range when you have 1 or 2 of these upgrades. And again, you lose them when you die. There's also different sub-weapons. There's shurikens you could throw. There's like this sharp orb gear thing. I don't really know what to call it. And there's also boomerangs, which will return to you when you throw them. And each of the sub-weapons has its own ammunition, so you can see that in the upper right corner. You'll also earn points by collecting gold and treasure. This mainly seemed to be just tied to earning 1-ups. I don't really think it serves a purpose other than that. I didn't see anything that tracked high scores or anything like that. And the way Argol controls is that not only do you have your sword attack that I mentioned, you have like this really short kind of lunge forward punch attack that I never really used very often because it didn't feel as useful as the sword attack, so I'm not really sure why that's there. You also have a jump attack, which felt kind of like out of Double Dragon. It felt a little weird, but once you get the hang of it, you can use it for a little bit extra distance at the height of your jumps. And it's a jump kick. So you just jump with the B button, and then if you hit B again while you're in midair, you'll kind of do like this tiny little like lunge forward with a kick. And that's something you really need to get used to for the platforming aspects of the game, because it's something that you'll need to kind of master. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself falling to your doom a lot. Some of the later levels have a lot of pits, one-hit death pits, and that's probably going to be the majority of your deaths, is falling into these pits. The enemy design's pretty good. It's kind of generic. The enemies each kind of have their own attacks, and you'll fight a lot of the same enemies over and over, but they do introduce like new ones over the course of the game to keep it feeling at least a little bit fresh. The bosses are pretty well designed. They're usually pretty difficult at first, because you need to learn their attack patterns. And most of them, they'll be kind of like a safe zone that you can dodge these particular attacks. And once you learn those, the bosses aren't too bad. Now, the beginning of the game is really enjoyable, and for the first 4 acts, I had a lot of fun with this. It was really enjoyable to kind of explore each of the acts because they are pretty open, but once I got to Act 5, man, I really hated Act 5. You're seeing it here, and just the design of it, it's massively large, and you need a bunch of keys to progress on this one, and there's all these different portals that bring you to these areas that are like shoot 'em up kind of sections where you fly on a Pegasus. I think my biggest complaint with these is that it's a little bit awkward to turn around because you have to press a button to change which direction you're looking in, but also your sprite is so large and takes up so much of the screen. It's easy to get hit by incoming projectiles and enemies at the last second because you don't have a lot of time. So they really needed to kind of scale the camera out a little bit in these areas to give you more time to react. So I found these not fun, quite frustrating, and this was kind of the point where I was kind of contemplating whether or not I even wanted to recommend this game. But ultimately, it does kind of suit that retro aesthetic and gameplay design, but it's okay to put modern touches on past games. And I think that's something that they kind of missed here a bit, is that they stuck too close to the 90s era of action platformers. And so if you don't enjoy like punishing aspects, like getting a game over on an act will send you back to the beginning. They'll replenish your lives, sure, and all the progress that you made though, maybe you spent 20 minutes on that level, it's all gone. You're basically starting over from the beginning. There's no checkpoints in that regard. So if you don't like losing progress and you don't like feeling lost and you don't like these kind of punishing aspects that are a bit less common in modern games, then I don't necessarily think that Argol is going to be a game for you. But if you do like that retro aesthetic, want to play a game that feels like a Super Nintendo game where you just use L and R and the 4 face buttons and then you just move, then this is probably a good one for you because it does check a lot of the boxes for what makes a fun indie action platformer. It has a great graphical style. The music is pretty good. It's mostly like rock music, but my main complaint I will say with the music is that it just felt kind of like rock music for the sake of being rock music. It didn't feel like any of the tracks really suited the environments that you were in. And I'm a really big fan of game music, and I appreciate when it's good, sure, but I also really appreciate when they kind of nail a song to an environment and it makes sense in that regard, and Argol kind of misses there. But this was Argol, Kronoss Castle. It's available now on Nintendo Switch. It was released in 2022 on Steam if you'd rather play it on PC. And if you like retro aesthetic games, this is a fun one. If you don't like punishing aspects or any of the things I outlined kind of is my complaints with the game, maybe pass on it because it might frustrate you to the point where you won't want to finish it. So, I appreciate you watching this review. Hope you found it helpful. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know if you plan on picking this up, or if you've already played it and what you thought of it. Did you share my sentiments, or did you really enjoy it, or maybe you really didn't enjoy it? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one.